Well, this will be part 3 of our series on Blinded by Chivalry. Blinded by Chivalry. And to start off, again, we're talking about why biblical marriage is antithetical to the kind of wife worship that chivalry demands. Because this chivalry involves associating both women and their feelings of romantic love with virtue and the divine. C.S. Lewis even talked about this, how he said biblical marriage is anti-chivalry. Biblical marriage is anti-chivalry because of male headship. The Bible clearly teaches about male headship, and because biblical marriage is based on commitment and not emotion. Because we know, let me tilt my hat a little more here. We know, and currently it seems to be more and more, that in our marriages, when the emotions fade away, many times the marriage dies because we don't have biblical marriages anymore. We have what I call RFPs, romantic feelings partnerships. And the partnerships end when the romantic feelings are no longer there. Then they end. That's not biblical marriage. So in the third part here, I wanted to continue on in Pastor Dalrock's piece about this. And he draws out another guy. I know in part 2 we talked about Doug Wilson and a book by Stoker and the other author there, but he talks about now Albert Mohler is laying out the same type of moral vision for romantic love and based on emotion in the marriage. And he says, and I think I've done videos on this before, but he says, Albert Mohler, put most bluntly, I believe that God means for a man to be civilized, directed, and stimulated toward marital faithfulness by the fact that his wife will freely give herself to him sexually only when he presents himself as worthy of her attention and desire. Now that, I'm sure if Albert Mohler could be questioned about this, he would probably retract this, I would think, if we could really dig in deep to this. Because that is very sinister. He is saying that your marriage is based on emotion, the emotional feelings of your wife. Then that's very sinister. I doubt he would defend that very hard if somebody pushed him on that. But Pastor Dalrock says, again, as C.S. Lewis wrote in his book, An Allegory of Love, he said, C.S. Lewis writes, the very idea of headship destroys the moral order of chivalry. How can a wife use her divine power to express God's will if she is supposed to obey her husband, which is what Scripture clearly says? All this other nonsense is not in Scripture. How can a husband kneel to his lady if she is supposed to submit to him and call him Lord, as 1 Peter says when Peter talks about the relationship between Abraham and Sarah? He writes, Pastor Doug Wilson clearly has wrestled with this problem, and this led him to creating a new theology of marriage. While in theory the husband is head and the wife is to obey her husband, Pastor Doug Wilson discovered that there is a loophole to headship and submission. Again, he is blinded by chivalry. It turns out that the wife is the despot of the home, and her husband should see himself in his own home as a guest. This new theology is nothing if not chivalrous. Okay, so here's what Pastor Doug Wilson writes about how a husband is the guest in his own home. He writes this, in a certain sense, a husband is an honored and permanent guest, but he should learn to see himself as a guest. He wipes his feet at the door, he eats what is served to him, and he seeks to conform to the pattern established by her, his wife, as she in turn seeks to honor him. So the husband should see himself as a guest in his own home. He should put himself in that mental framework, not the head rightly established by Scripture. Again, we are blinded by chivalry. blinded by chivalry. And these are very conservative pastors. These are not egalitarian pastors that are saying this stuff. So Pastor Dalrock writes, moreover, since under chivalry, women's romantic love is seen as something pure and holy, the lifetime commitment of biblical marriage is incompatible with chivalry. Because again, chivalry is based on emotions. It's based on romantic feelings. This is the very root of our current acceptance of no-fault divorce. Oh, man. And this view goes all the way back to the Puritans. No, so then he's going to go into, Pastor Dalrock's going to write about this famous Puritan poet, John Milton, who wrote in Tetrachordon, he said, and although copulation be considered among the ends of marriage, he's talking about sex and marriage, yet the act thereof in a right esteem can no longer be matrimonial, then it is an effect of conjugal love. Okay, so he's saying you have to have love to have sex and marriage. When love finds itself utterly unmatched and justly vanishes, okay, so now the love is gone in the marriage, nay, rather cannot but vanish, the fleshly act, talking about sex, indeed may continue, but not holy, not pure, not beseeming the sacred bond of marriage, being at best an animal excretion. So John Milton is saying when there's no romantic love in the marriage, sex is not holy, pure, and not even beseeming the bond of marriage. It's not even worthy of marriage. Scripture does not say that. That is nowhere found in Scripture. And so Pastor Dalrock writes, this idea that romantic love and not marriage purifies sex is not a biblical idea. And in fact, the Bible tells the Christian husbands that they should approach their wives like a rutting buck, which is what Song of Solomon says. Or is that, it's either Solomon or Proverbs. So we see that this blinding of chivalry is just, it's throughout all of evangelicalism. And we got to get rid of this. This is not what the Bible has for our marriages. And this is why I think Pastor Dalrock is linking this with the explosion of divorce in our culture. And it's bad. I mean, we can't be blinded by chivalry. All right, but with all that being said, Christ is still winning. He is building his church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Until next time, this is the Postmillennial Man.